Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Left-Handed Leftist podcast. As always, my name's Carlos. I'm your host, and I'm so glad to have you all here with me this week. You all, for those of you who don't know this about me, I actually graduated with my degree in culinary arts. That's how I got my start. That was the first start of my career path. One thing I'll say is that culinary arts really taught me a few things about being a chef, but one of the main things that culinary arts taught me was that you do not need to go to culinary school to be able to have a career within the culinary field. But the other thing it taught me is that your food and the dishes that you make are only as good as the ingredients that you get. And with Thanksgiving coming up, Christmas, Hanukkah, all the different holidays that center around food, I wanted to really take time and talk today about the food. Talk about food. Talk about the deregulation that we have seen of farming. Talk about how we see ever more increasing food deserts throughout the country where people aren't able to access fresh fruits, vegetables, and meats as well. And then talk about how the deregulation of food is also creating an unsafe environment when it comes to the workers of these factory farms. So, with that, you all, let's get into our first article. So, our first article is by Sentient Media. It is titled Meat Industry Group Asks Trump to Deregulate Meatpacking and Factory Farms. Amid a deregulatory blitz, trade group pushes for rollback on environmental regulations, worker protections, and food safety. And this article was by Nina B. Al-Qadi. The article starts by saying the Clean Water Act, salmonella inspections, and equity in the Packers and Stockyards Act are just a few of the regulations that the industry lobbying group, the Meat Institute, formerly known as the North American Meat Institute, is calling for the Trump administration to pull back. On January 27th, Meat Institute President Julia Ann Potts penned a letter to the White House providing the new administration with, quote, strategies to reduce burdensome regulation and address meat prices for consumers. In the letter, Potts blames the previous administration for inflation, which she claims was caused by increased regulation in the food industry. Potts also targets increased worker protection against discrimination, which she claims are part of diversity, equity, and inclusion practices. Quote, based on what they propose, the path to lower food prices is exploiting child labor and engaging in sharecropping production models. Austin Frerick, antitrust expert and author of Barron's, Money, Power, and the Corruption of America's Food Industry, tells Sentient. Quote, they're grab bagging words in the moment to fit their deregulatory race to the bottom. If Trump takes the advice of this lobbying group, which touts its reputation of meat packers and processors that, quote, account for more than 95% of U.S. output of processed meats, experts do not agree that prices will necessarily go down. According to Food and Water Watch staff attorney Emily Miller, the real issue at play is consolidation in the industry. Quote, we know that the real cost of high food prices in this country is not inflation or the cost of regulatory compliance, as the industry is claiming. It's the corporate consolidation and greed, Miller says. Quote, rolling back regulations that are meant to protect farmers, slaughterhouse workers, frontline communities, and consumers from exploitation and pollution will just allow the meat industry to break even more profit. While food prices have increased at a fast rate, as much as 2.5 times the rate of inflation, profits have skyrocketed 5 times faster than inflation. 4 companies control around 70% of the pork industry, and 4 companies control more than half the chicken processing market. Even if the industry successfully deregulates and lowers costs associated with stricter environmental and worker protections, there is no guarantee that it will result in lower food prices. Corporations can continue to pocket the difference. And you all, let's stop right there for a second. I mean, as always, we see corporations, whenever it comes to their profits, the first thing that they blame is workers' rights, health, and environmental regulations. And now it is weird that they're even trying to claim DEI as the reason that they're having a hard time and that prices are going up. And it's funny that they at no point mention prices going and linking that to the increased profits that they have. Because honestly, if these corporations could, they would expand the slavery that's already allowed in this country. And the reason that I say it's already allowed in this country, because if you look at our constitution, when the constitution banned slavery, it actually allowed slavery to happen when it comes to incarcerated individuals, where you see a lot of times incarcerated people are made to make products. They're made to work for different businesses and corporations that contract with the jail or prison, paying the people actually like pennies compared to what their work is actually valued at. I mean, you even look at places like California, where you have a lot of the firefighters in these wildfires are actually people from the prison system. And you look here, right here in the state of Maryland, where you have the people who build the furniture within the Maryland General Assembly, that actually comes from prison labor. And I highly doubt the people who are actually incarcerated are even getting paid what their work is actually worth, which again also cuts worker protections as well. Because if these corporations or if the government could not go to incarcerated people to do their work, they would have to actually pay people what they're worth on the private market, or just hiring people outright. Another thing I want to talk about here is that how you have the consolidation ownership when it comes to these factory farming. When you have four corporations owning 70% of pork production, or having four companies owning half of chicken processing, you really have a problem there. We saw that during COVID with the supply chain. To once there was one problem with one company, we saw that it was a domino effect, because all of these farms are owned by the same people. And everyone loves to talk about capitalism. They love to talk about how capitalism is the free market, and you go there where like anyone can either have great success or fail. But they always leave out the part that capitalism is not a free market. Capitalism is made to set up monopolies. It is made to benefit corporations to keep expanding and expanding and expanding, for them to eat up the entire market, to where it's just them and maybe one other company battling it out. So we see here that the problem that the corporations will always say is, whenever there's actual rights for the community and community benefits, that those are the problem. But they do not talk about how, again, that the rising costs have anything to do with their profits. And one thing that I love that they mentioned in the last part here is that, let's say that these corporations, they win, they get Trump and establishment politicians to deregulate their whole industry. There's nothing guaranteeing that the excess profit that they're going to make has to even go towards lowering the cost. They can just continue to bank those profits. So let's keep reading what this could mean for workers. One rule the Meat Institute wants to rescind is the Inclusive Competition and Market Integrity under the Packers and Stockyards Act. The rule, which went into effect in 2024, quote, prohibits the adverse treatment of livestock producers and poultry growers based on race, color, religion, national orientation, sex, including pregnancy, sexual orientation and gender, disability, marital status, or age. The Meat Institute claims this rule, quote, attempts to enshrine diversity, equity, and inclusion concepts into the act. Quote, I think this is definitely a way of baiting Trump to act, Miller says. Quote, what they're really asking pretty unabashedly is for the ability to discriminate against other people for personal characteristics that have nothing to do with their business or the economy, or anything that would have any sort of justification, which is pretty outrageous. Another set of protections that the Institute targets in its bid to the new administration relates to contract chicken producers. Farmers who raise chickens on a contract basis for mega corporations like Tyson Foods under the Biden administration. The regulations had been intended in part to help chicken farmers who end up taking on enormous debts as part of their contractual agreements with poultry companies. So just real quick there, you even see that their main fight is to, yes, always increase profits, but also be able to openly discriminate against the farmers who without them, there would be no Tyson's food. So I just want to say that without the actual day to day, like farming workers, the people who raise the chickens, raise the pork, who grow our vegetables, without them, there would be no Tyson's food. There would be no Purdue. There will be none of those like eat fresh companies. And what is the thanks that these corporations give to the people who allow them to even have a business is not to make sure that they're paid well, make sure that they protect their workers. Their thank you to them is basically, how can we discriminate against you even more than we already do and keep you more in tied to us as you already do? Because you even see here that chicken farmers are even taking on debts just to fulfill these contracts. And you have these mega corporations who are trying to figure out how can they allow these small farms to take on more debt or make it so that they're not responsible for any of the debt that they take on as well. Again, you see these corporations main people that they're looking out for is themselves, not the community. So the article continues to say what this could mean for the environment. The Clean Water Act is considered one of the cornerstones of environmental protections in the US. But when it comes to regulation, the discharges from agriculture, it has long fallen short. Clawing back the already weakened regulatory power of the act could further pollute waterways that are already in poor shape, especially in states with increasing density of factory farms. For instance, more than half of the rivers and streams are degraded in Iowa, a state where most counties are, quote, severely or highly concentrated with factory farms. Miller of Food and Water Watch notes that the federal government is under a court enforceable settlement that requires them to finalize the rule the meat industry wants to dismantle. Any efforts to roll that back, she says, would be in direct violation of the settlement. Quote, the industry would, of course, want the least amount of regulation possible and to maintain the status quo that allows them to really harm the communities that neighbor these operations, which overwhelmingly are low income communities of color, she says. In states dominated by factory farms, manure discharged into waterways has led to detrimental health outcomes, fish kills, and higher drinking water costs. In addition, much of the meat produced in Iowa factory farms is in turn exported. Quote, we're basically destroying rural communities in the Midwest, notably Iowa, to feed foreign nations, Frerick says. Quote, the environmental destruction these production models do, and that says something when it's cheaper to do it here than in China. Frerick argues that Republican administrations, quote, turbocharge the race to the bottom with deregulation, opening the doors for catastrophic changes to not only the food system itself, but consumer trust and confidence that they're getting a safe product. Quote, you're playing Russian roulette with people's health and safety. If you have one big scandal, one big outbreak, you could really shift people's consumption and food diets in profound ways that can really wreck that really can wreck an industry, Frerick says. What this could mean for food safety. Pulling back proposed salmonella regulations could endanger consumers. J.D. Hansen, policy director of the Center for Food Safety, tells Sentient. Meat Institute is calling to replace a proposed rule that would increase monitoring in the poultry slaughterhouse process with, quote, a performance standard with an input of stakeholders. Quote, I'm concerned that the next thing they'll be pushing for is less aggressive enforcement of rules on E. coli, he tells Sentient. Quote, we don't want to go back to poor inspections with state inspectors that are being bribed and say that that's going to give us cheaper meat. You want a regulatory system where consumers know they're getting a healthy, safe product that was produced in a way that was ethical, Frerick says. Quote, when you get rid of that, you incentivize the worst people. So even in this, you see these corporations, they don't just want to make it so their workers are having a difficult time or that they do not have to give back to the community as much. they openly want to destroy your community. These factory farms openly want your drinking water to be compromised. They want the waterways to be compromised. They want more pollution in the air. Again, corporations do not care about us as people. They care about profits. For them, it is always profit over people. And even with them pushing back on salmonella regulations is insane to me, because we had a whole scare when there was the bird flu. There has been, and there are people who to this day do not eat chicken because of the diseases that have been linked to it. You have people who do not eat pork products because of diseases that are linked to it. And it seems like every so often we have these major recalls of different meats or different vegetables. And you would think that because that makes people so fearful of actually eating these food products, that these factory farms will want stronger regulations when it comes to making sure that their food is safe. We see it's the opposite. They would rather the food be poison and just either no one's there to check it, or just say, hey, look, it's going to be poison. Either you buy it or you don't. We'll roll the dice, just so they can save a few dollars out of their profit. It again shows us that they do not care about the even quality of the product that they give us. And one quote here is really crazy when they're talking about how doing this actually makes it cheaper for them to produce meat in the United States than it is to China. And for everyone listening, that should be very shocking, especially when we look at things, at products being cheaper. We normally associate them with being made in China because of their weak worker protections and pay for certain workers who work in China. The United States is very close to them as well, and our corporations are pushing as hard as ever just to make sure that our workers here and our community members here are not reaping any benefits from these corporations having high profits, but also so that we are dealing with all of the negative impacts that come from these corporations having such a stronghold over our government. The bottom line, quote, any regulatory rollbacks that allow the meat industry to further consolidate its market power will just have the opposite effect on consumers and on food prices generally, Miller says. Quote, efforts to roll those things back would just continue to inflict harm on the people who are growing and producing our food in this country, and simply give a bigger profit margin to the corporations that are at the top of the food chain. Though no distinct moves have been made to address the Meat Institute's requests, on January 23rd, Trump's White House announced a deregulatory blitz requiring whenever an agency promulgates a new rule, regulation, or guidance, it must identify at least 10 existing rules, regulations, or guidance documents to be repealed. Concentrated markets gouge. It's what they do. You see innovation and quality decline, Frederick tells Sentient. Quote, once you add in the costs, the negative externalities, all the pollution stuff, it's even more expensive. So we're being double screwed, to be blunt. You all, that really kind of just shows that be careful out there. When you are doing grocery shopping, please look at who you're buying your food from. Try not to buy food from these factory farms. Try to go to your local farmers market and local farms. And I want to say it's very hard. It's very hard to, because a lot of people do not live in areas that they're able to do that. But also there's so much consolidation. And our next article is actually going to get into the consolidation that we've seen of these food companies and how they are taking over the farming industry. So our next article is actually a flyer from ourworldindata.org. It says most livestock in the United States is factory farm. Quote, factory farms are defined as, quote, concentrated animal feeding operations based on the U.S. EPA's definition of holding a large number of animals in an intensive feeding operation for more than 45. 99.96% of chickens are factory farmed. That's 9.2 billion. 99.8% of turkeys are factory farmed. That's 260 billion. 100% of farm fish are factory farmed. That's 530 million. 75% of cows are factory farmed, which is 66 million. 98.3% of egg laying hens are factory farmed. That's 380 million. and 98.6% of pigs are factory farmed, which is 73 million. And this was by the Census Institute 2024, and this data is for 2022. I mean, we even see here factory farms have a distinct monopoly over the entire industry of meats. All the main meats that people eat, chicken, turkey, fish, cow, pork products are majority and almost all 100% owned by factory farms, which means we do not have farms anymore that ensures that their first priority is the well-being of the animals. We see that now the well-being of food that we eat in the animals is not the well-being is in the animals, it is the well-being of the corporate profit that these factory farms are able to make. So when Thanksgiving rolls around and you start cooking that turkey, nine times out of, well, actually not 99.8% out of 100%, you're eating a factory farm turkey, which means your turkey was made with profit being the priority, not the actual health and well-being and cleanliness of the turkey that you're about to eat. Let's go to our next article that talks about how activist groups and organizations are fighting back against factory farming and deregulation of food. And this article is by Food and Water Watch. It is titled Three Policy Changes We Need to Fight Factory Farms. And this is by Rebecca Wolf and Lily Richard. For decades, U.S. policy has promoted polluting factory farms and big ag megacorporations. We can change that with policies that put people over profit. Barb Callback is a fourth generation farmer in central Iowa, and she has seen the state's agricultural system transform in just a few decades. Quote, I grew up with hogs, cattle, chicken, and a few milk cows. Barb remembers. During that time, farmers typically raised a variety of livestock and grew a variety of crops. But today, a destructive model of animal agriculture has made farms like this increasingly rare. The factory farm industry, which raises thousands, even millions of animals in tight confines, has exploded. Now there are 1.7 billion factory farmed animals in the United States, and they produce twice as much waste as the country's human population. Factory farms, also called CAFOs or concentrated animal feeding operations, flood nearby communities with nauseating fumes. Their waste pollutes beloved lakes and vital drinking water sources. They're also deeply enmeshed with overproduction of corn and soy for feed, which has transferred the Midwest landscape and further fueled water pollution crisis. The industry devastates rural economies and pushes out smaller and medium-sized family farms. All of this is not inevitable nor an accident. Quote, we're getting the type of animal production and agriculture in the food system that our policies are designed to deliver, says Frank James, executive director of Dakota Rural Action. Decades of bad policy have allowed factory farms and the mega corporations that control it to grow. Small and medium-sized farmers, working families, and rural communities are being sacrificed for big ag's profit. But just as policy got us into this mess, policy can get us out. Here are three changes we need to fight factory farms and foster a fair, sustainable food system. So before we get into the three, one thing I want to highlight that they highlighted here, but I didn't mention in the last article, was that you have factory farms, and I'm glad that they said it, are polluting communities, but a lot of these factory farms wind up getting put in not just rural communities, but also rural communities of Black and brown and other non-white people as well, which means that these factory farms are going to communities that they believe no one's going to complain. And if they do complain, they're so marginalized already that the politicians and the elected officials who they're supposed to represent are not going to care about them. And a lot of times these factory farms and these corporations are lining the pockets of the politicians to pay them to not care about the actual residents that they're harming. So with that, let's get into these three policy points. 1, we need to level the playing field for farmers with antitrust enforcement. Before the factory farm model, raising livestock provided farmers with a more secure livelihood. In the hog industry, farmers sold their animals to the highest bidder at buying stations. Quote, it was a competitive, functioning marketplace, remembers Rhonda Perry, a fifth generation farmer and executive director of Missouri Rural Crisis Center. This kept farmers' incomes sustainable. However, this system has collapsed in recent decades. The growth of vertical integrated factory farms, suppliers, and processors has pushed smaller independent operations out of business. According to Barb Callback, there haven't been buying stations in her area since early 2000s. Instead, many farmers' only option is to sell a massive meat corporation like Smithfield, JBS, and Tyson, and the lack of competition allows the corporations to call the shot. They've used that power to mandate more and bigger industrialized operations while paying bargain bin prices to farmers. The result has been devastating for rural communities and family farms. For example, in just a few decades, Iowa lost 90% of its hog farms. Meanwhile, the number of hogs raised in the state grew dramatically. We have laws to foster more competition and combat the unfair and unhealthy expansion of corporate power. These antitrust laws, like the Packers and Stockyards Act, were meant to encourage fair business practices as well as prevent mergers that would concentrate power in bigger and fewer companies. But decades of weak enforcement have led to today's crisis of endemic corporate power and factory farming. Big Ag has grown unchecked. It has forced small and medium sized farmers out of the market in droves, and it has forced those that remain into harmful industrialized practices. To solve this crisis, we need a flourishing marketplace where lots of businesses compete on a level playing field. To that end, our government needs to rein in big ag by stopping mega mergers and enforcing our antitrust laws as they were intended. So that's one thing. As we see corporations consolidate power, we do not see that benefit being shared to the population. A lot of times when they consolidate power, they're like the article said, small businesses out of business or just buying them up in total, and then they are putting more work on the farmers by saying, since we bought all of the hog producers up, we're going to keep a few of you all and basically make you all farm all of the hogs that normally would have been shared amongst multiple people. So now not only is the corporation owning more and bringing in more profit, you have farmers who are working extra hard just to be able to keep up with the demand that is put on them. And as we know, when people are stretched thin, then that means the not productivity, the actual quality of everything starts to dwindle. So now our food is less safe because the workers are being stressed out, all the while the corporations are reaping all of the benefit. So let's go on to the second policy point. We need regulations to rein in factory farm pollution. CAFOs have helped empty out the countryside. I mean, nobody's going to build their house next door to a CAFO, says Barb Callback, now a member of the Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement. She first got involved in the fight against factory farms when someone tried to build one near her home. Barb and her community successfully stopped it and all the problems that they knew it would bring. Concentrating all those animals and all their waste into such small spaces has physical impacts on nearby communities. Sickening stenches and polluted, undrinkable water are two common ones. Despite these known issues, factory farms are built and managed with shockingly little regulation. No industry has escaped environmental regulation for air and water pollution like the ag industry. This applies to local, state, and federal levels. For example, the Federal Clean Water Act is supposed to protect our water from polluters, yet factory farms have long received a free pass, reinforced by weak state regulations. Fewer than a third of the country's 21,000 largest CAFOs have Clean Water Act pollution permits, which are supposed to reduce and monitor for pollution. At the same time, state and local laws opened the floodgates for factory farms to build with little oversight. Iowa's 1996 HF 519, for instance, made it easier for factory farms to get construction permits and established weak penalties for manure pollution, among other measures. factory farm companies are exploiting these weak regulations to expand. Quote, they're expanding so fast, so close in some of these communities, says Vanessa Namkin, a member of the Dakota Rural Action, who organized to stop a factory farm near her home. Quote, we need better regulation because that's why they're coming. We don't have regulation, we don't have oversight, and we don't have enforcement. Local, state, and federal policy must hold factory farms accountable for their harms, including enforcing the Clean Water Act as intended. And you all, one thing that this is reminding me of as we're going through this, especially on the regulation front, and making sure that there is regulation for the strain on the environment that we're seeing is data centers. As we're seeing these data centers are coming in, and it is especially because we don't have regulation, there is no oversight really, and there's no enforcement when it is actual regulation on the books. We've seen these data centers come in, destroy an environment, boost their own profits, and then look at the residents as, oh well, get over it. And that I'm sure is happening in the farming industry. You also have politicians who are getting their pockets lined by these different pork producers, chicken producers, beef producers as well, so that you have politicians who are getting paid to deregulate these factory farms as well, furthering destroying the same community which they're supposed to represent. Again, it just shows you that politicians are not here to protect you. They're here to protect the people who donate to their campaigns. So 3, we need incentives to support farmers, not corporations. US farm policy for decades has created a system that rewards faster, bigger, cheaper. This has benefited corporations at the expense of animals, farmers, workers, and the environment. For example, we used to have programs that kept the production and prices of commodities like corn and soy steady. Now, however, federal policies encourage rampant overproduction, in great part to supply factory farms with cheaper feed. Government programs also incentivize the overproduction of animal products, like milk, for export. This enriches corporations but causes milk prices to plummet, making it harder than ever for smaller dairy farmers to make a living. Bonnie Hagen, a Minnesota farmer and member of the Land Stewardship Project, has been raising dairy cows on pasture, not a factory farm, for 30 years. Quote, this is the first year we decided not to ship milk, she says. The milk prices are so uncertain. Maybe one year milk prices are good and they might be good enough to keep you going, but not good enough to really get ahead. Moreover, taxpayers are footing the bill for programs that incentivize factory farms. The Department of Agriculture's Environmental Quality Incentives Program pay factory farmers to install digesters, which turn manure into methane gas. The industry poses this factory farm gas as a, quote, sustainable energy source, but it actually worsens climate, air, and water pollution. These supports are expanding the factory farm industry. Quote, to make more methane, you need more manure, and to make more manure, you need more animals, says Frank James. The truth is, if you start paying factory farms to pollute, they're never going to stop polluting. Right now, factory farm gas is getting more government support than ever. This needs to end, as do incentives for overproduction. Instead, we should be helping farmers grow sustainably and transition away from the factory farm model. I mean, what's worse than our tax dollars being used to destroy our own environment, which honestly is part of the course for the United States and for what corporations lobby for as well. I mean, you literally have corporations who lobbied to be able to make sure that the manure that they generate, they can get paid for because they can turn that into methane gas, which in turn makes them even a higher profit. So like the article even says, you're going to have factory farms who continue to put more animals than probably capacity could even hold into one enclosed space so that they can make more so they can make more manure, and on top of that they can make more methane gas so that they can just continue to increase their profits. But nowhere in here do you hear about how these corporations are even giving back to the communities that they're harming. And even in all this like profit that you have, and you saw this partly with the government shutdown, that you had these food companies saying that, oh, we're going to start giving back to the community. We're providing all this free food to people. Let's not act like this food that they're providing is not a tax write off for them as well, that they're not also making that money back. No corporation, or I'll say very little corporations, are actually going to take from their profit to give to the same community that they're lobbying to hurt and destroy. So, finishing the article up, policy got us into this mess, policy can get us out. The factory farm model's supposed benefit is its quote efficiency. But what it's really best at is efficiency for generating profits for corporations while harming our environment, health, and communities. During the COVID-19 pandemic, corporations like Tyson pushed prices and their own profits to new heights. Corporate power and corporate greed are key contributors to today's food affordability crisis. But these are all born of policy choices. Our government can and must make different choices. For example, in Iowa, Food and Water Watch is working with BARB, Callback, and ICCI to pass the Clean Water Act for Iowa. This bill would require pollution permits and monitoring for the state's largest factory farms. Currently, less than 4% are regulated. It would finally start holding factory farms accountable for their pollution in Iowa. At the national level, FFE is pushing for laws like the Farm System Reform Act. This would stop the construction of new factory farms and help farmers transition out of that system. We're also advocating for programs that keep production and prices steady and for the end of incentives for factory farms and unchecked corporate power. CFFE is calling out the use of public dollars and public policy to support factory farms and the multinational meatpacking giants they serve. We're building public support for reforms to level the playing field for family farm livestock producers. This sustainable and healthy food system is possible, and we're working to build grassroots power to make it happen. So, you all, I'm really glad that we're able to see that there are organizations out there who are fighting the good fight to be able to put these monopolies and these factory farms in check. Because when these factory farms are allowed to run rampant, we see that they are not going to stop until they are making all the profits they can while destroying our environment, our livelihood, workers' rights, and the community as much as they can. So with that, let's go to our final article clip here to look at food desert. So you all, first shout out to Spencer's NY for this clip, really again detailing how communities are coming together. And the one thing that I do love is that this is a rural community and a community of people who normally would not be expected to start a quote unquote socialized grocery store. Republican small rural towns and communities are really showing that people do not care whether you call it socialism, leftism, communism, whatever. When people come together, their main goal is to feed their community and make sure that nobody is left behind. So I'm really just like happy that they were able to show that this is not just some crazy left wing idea from Zorhan Mamdani in New York City, but it's actually something that has been done before and has proof of working. While at the same time, it also shows how these big corporations, every chance they get to ruin something good that's happening for the community, they will do it. You have Dollar General moving in next to these small publicly owned grocery stores, just to one, take away business from the grocery store, increase their profits. Two, they do not provide sustainable food to the communities because all of their products are ultra processed and made for a sustainable shelf life, but also they do not have to replenish their food as much, so undercutting grocery stores who are actually having fresh produce and meats, which have to replenish their inventory regularly. Three, Dollar General also has a history of horrific labor practices where you have them severely understaffing their establishments. So you may have one or two workers per shift who they have to both stock, take inventory, clean, all at the same time. And then on top of that, you also have people who have reported that the Dollar Generals even control the air conditioning and a heat within a store from some national headquarters, which means they're even doing this to make sure, as they would say, to like minimize profit losses. So really, all of this being said, the one thing I hope that people take away from not just this podcast, but this TikTok video is also to not trust corporations, whether they be factory farms, whether they be big agriculture, whether they be Dollar General stores. Just know that these corporations do not come to your community in order to help you. They are not coming to build up your neighborhood. They are not coming to invest in your community. What they are coming to is to drain as much resources and also to just drive up their own profit for their shareholders. So with that, you all, again, I want to ask you to please share this with a friend, like it, follow us on any podcast platform that you're listening to, and also YouTube as well. And then also please remember that a new episode comes out every Wednesday at 7 a.m. I look forward to seeing you all here next time on The Left-Handed Leftist. Have a good night, you all. Be safe.